Tá bom. Sim.
Inclusive é menor, a gente não tem muita coisa para preencher.
Tá bom.
Isso. Porque não mais vai chegar. Deve ser por causa da neve. As pessoas lá, teve gente rodando na nossa frente. Essa parou, assim, uma canção assim, não foi uma Okay, so let's get started. Yes, let's get started with a text from our daily bread, from Nos. And it's number 59, and it's called, Let Us Proceed Until We Are There. If you remain in me, and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be given you. Jesus in the Gospel of John 15:7. In the Lord's Prayer, Jesus explains to his followers the necessity for the complete observance of the Father's designs. The Master knew that human will is still quite fragile, and that numerous battles encircle the human being until he learns to establish a union with the divine. In spite of this, the lesson of the prayer was always interpreted by the vast majority of believers to be an easy recourse for obtaining celestial protection. There are many who request special concessions and mechanically recite verbal formulas. Logically, they cannot receive immediate satisfaction to their personal whims because in the state of weakness and ignorance, the Spirit requires, prior to anything else, to learn to submit to the divine designs concerning himself. In any event, we will achieve the moment when our prayers are completely fulfilled. We will accomplish this when we are actually spiritually in tune with the Christ. At that point, whenever we so desire, it shall be done, because we will have penetrated the just reason for each thing and the finality of each circumstance. We will be capable of wishing for and requesting in tune with Jesus, and life will present itself in its genuine, infinite, eternal, renovating, and beautiful characteristics. Whether incarnate or discarnate, we are still walking toward the Master, intent on being able to experience the glorious union with His love. Until we get there, let us work and be vigilant in order to understand the divine will. Let's do our initial prayer. Dear Master Jesus, we thank you for this Sunday that we are physically capable to be here. We thank you for our bodies, for our health. We thank you for everything you give us. Even the things that seem to be problems or obstacles, because they are what lead us to think and evolve intellectually, and they also give us the opportunity to use our free will properly. All the problems we need to solve, all the situations we need to overcome, they are our blessed and divine opportunity to grow, to evolve, and to exercise all the teachings that you brought us. Dear Father, we ask you that you bless the work we do here today, that you bless the meeting we are having here today, so that we can all leave FSS today with a little bit more understanding of what we are doing here, of our purpose, of our objectives. May we be able to exercise a little bit of what we learned here today, patiently, continuously, with discipline, and always persevere on all the things that we know are right. I think we need to stop the music. As you know how, let me see. Yeah, Moa said something about alt tab.
Okay, I don't see anything.
Yeah, okay, I'll try.
Maybe.
No,
I don't want to mess up.
Oh, no worries, and I feel
I don't want to interrupt.
it's all good.
This is over here. I'll have to continue pushing.
Because when you did it,
Yeah,
you didn't have to.
yeah. Yeah.
Oh, no, yeah.
Oh, there. It should be here.
All right. And I think it should work again.
Maybe I'll stay here for.
Oh, yeah, there.
A minute. Oh, there you go.
Let me just make sure that it's, yes.
There you go.
Perfect. Okay. So today we are going to talk about, in Portuguese it's called bem-aventuranças, in English it's called beatitudes. So today we're going to talk about the beatitude that says, blessed are the poor in spirit. And the question is, what should be understood by poor in spirit? I know you have already seen this in Portuguese, so
Well, if I'm here today, it means I need you here again, and not in English.
exactly. Well, you know,
Not just for the English vocabulary, but
it's
means-
definitely another opportunity to reflect and to ask more questions. Because today we have time.
Oh, there you go.
So today we can discuss all possible questions.
Well, maybe today I won't have as many questions because I will listen again, reflect again, and respond my own questions.
Sounds
We'll
good.
see, we'll see.
Sounds good.
Mhm.
Okay, so the whole beatitude is blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And then you already know the answer, but what should we understand? What should be understood by poor in spirit? Right? Because in English, more so than in Portuguese, the word poor has more meanings than one. In Portuguese, we have que pobre de espírito, which is exactly the opposite of well, not opposite, but it's different from what we're trying to say.
Mhm.
But in English, we also have different interpretations for the word poor. For example, when I say he's a poor teacher,
Mhm.
some people will understand he's a teacher with no money, and some teacher will understand he's not a good teacher. Poor can mean not good at something, right?
Mhm.
So poor in spirit, so not a good spirit, or a spirit, a person without money. Is that what Jesus meant?
No.
No, we are here, we're not talking about social classes, we're not talking about the rich versus the poor and stuff. And like we discussed on Monday, there is also the big possibility that this is not exactly the word Jesus used and something got lost in translation. Because what he means by poor in spirit is,
Translate. Well, my understanding is that that you're poor of the negative feelings, or you're more humble.
exactly, poor in
It's
spirit
different.
means
It's
humble.
different to explain in English,
Isn't it?
Yeah.
It takes quite a bit of practice.
I
actually.
know. And I wasn't thinking about, okay, I know what does it mean?
Yeah, in Portuguese I got it all, but how is it in English again?
Yeah. Hello.
Hi there. Okay, so by poor in spirit, what Jesus actually means is humble, right? So blessed are those humble in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And this is in Matthew's 5:3. What is in chapter 5? What is in Matthew chapter 5?
Yeah, that I don't remember.
Are you crazy? Are you crazy enough that you want me to memorize the Bible?
Great.
Yeah, are you
Teaching,
crazy?
but
You
I
want to
don't
memorize? Yeah, you want me to memorize the Bible? The books are insane. But actually, Matthew 5 and chapter 6 as well, we, in general, we should know what's in there. Where, because this is a beatitude, right? Blessed are the meek, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are those who suffer, blessed, blessed, blessed. Those are the beatitudes, or in Portuguese as bem-aventuranças. When does Jesus say that? And when in his postulate does he say that, in his ministry?
During the, I don't know. I really need more. The mountain sermon.
Very close. In English, it's called Sermon on the Mount.
There you go. I think I need to improve.
In Portuguese, é
My
uma
English a lot
montanha.
more.
In English, Sermon on the Monte.
Yes.
Okay, so it's
Like,
called
draw.
Sermon on the Mount. Yes.
I'm glad people cannot see me draw.
Well, actually, maybe they can see a little picture.
Okay.
I don't know. I'll take a look after on YouTube to see if the finger shows. But yeah, Mount.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Jesus says this during the Sermon on the Mount, and
Sermon on the Mount.
On the Mount, yeah. And it's verse 3. So it's like right the third verse. It's the very beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, right? Okay, so he's saying that blessed are the humble in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. why? Why the humble people have the kingdom of heaven? What is the kingdom of heaven? Where? Where is the kingdom of heaven? Is it the place I go after I die? Is it a geographical place? Where is the kingdom of heaven? Where is it located?
Within us, in our conscience.
Exactly. The kingdom of heaven is not a place we go after we die. It's within us. It's us being connected to God. It's us in tune with God within us, with our conscience. That's where the kingdom of heaven is. So we don't need to die to go to the kingdom of heaven. We will bring the kingdom of heaven into us when we are finally in tune with God through Jesus, because Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. So through Jesus' examples, by following Jesus, that's how we're going to get in tune with God. Jesus is our path. If we follow the path, we are in tune with Jesus and in tune with God. Okay, so that's where the kingdom of heaven is, within us. The more we are in tune with God, the closer we are to the kingdom of heaven. All right, so this whole talk we're having right now, everything was taken from the gospel according to Spiritism. It's all in chapter 7. And here I have only bits and pieces of chapter 7. So of course, I would recommend everybody 10 minutes. 10 minutes you can read the whole chapter. It's not a long chapter. And it has a whole lot more than what's in here. Here it's just bits and pieces. But go to the chapter and read the whole chapter, and we're going to have a whole lot of food for thought, a whole lot of things to reflect and think about. Okay. So, by the poor in spirit, Jesus did not mean those devoid or without intelligence, but the humble, inasmuch as he said that the kingdom of heaven would be for them, the humble, and not for the prideful. Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 7, item 2. Now, why can't the prideful have the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven? Why is the kingdom of heaven for the humble and not for the prideful? Because God doesn't love the prideful? God doesn't love the prideful?
Yeah, he loves everyone. But I think it's remembering that the kingdom of heaven is within ourselves. If we have all of these negative feelings of pride and selfishness and things like that, we are not allowing ourselves to make that connection with the divine, because we can't accept that, or sometimes we unconsciously we cannot accept that there is a God or a creator, so we can't really make that connection. That's how I see. I'm not sure if my English is actually what I hopefully.
No, you're very, very clear. And you're close to what I wanted here. So of course, God's not choosing favorites. He's not favoring the humble instead of the prideful. It's, again, well, we have 2 moms here today, so I can use this analogy. It's like our children. Mainly when you have 2 and you can compare one to the other, we are all different. We are all unique. We all have unique experiences, right? Now, we love our children no matter what, but we also know what things each child needs to develop more than the other. I know that one needs to do this more than the other. That doesn't mean I love them any less, right? So God doesn't love anybody any less for all the virtues they still haven't developed. It's just a matter of time. We will all get there. The speed, of course, depends on us, but we will all get there. But the reason why the kingdom of heaven is not for the prideful is because, remember, before we were saying that the kingdom of heaven is when we are what with God? Connected, in tune. Now, can we be in tune with God if we are prideful? Can I accept all the virtues? All of them. Humbleness, love, charity, justice. If I am prideful, can a prideful person be really fair? Do you think a prideful person can be fair to everybody? No. No, because pride leads to selfishness. And if I'm selfish, I can't be totally fair because I'll always think, my pride will always tell me that I am right, no matter what. If I am selfish, it's everything for myself, which from the start says that I'm not being fair, right? So right there, law of justice is not being fulfilled. If I am selfish, I want everything for myself. I'm not thinking about anybody else. Law of charity, not being fulfilled. Right? So that's why the kingdom of heaven is not for the prideful. First of all, the kingdom of heaven is not something that God gives us. It's something that we achieve. And when we are still in this state of ignorance, we can't achieve. We are not walking down the path. So that's why it's for the humble, because the humble is on the path. To understanding the divine laws, to accepting the divine laws. The prideful is still sitting on that rock saying, no, 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 no. Okay? So again, if we have that old idea, that old notion that the kingdom of heaven is something that God will give me if I'm a good kid, we have to forget that notion. Because the kingdom of heaven is something we achieve when we are in tune with God. And when we are in the ignorance of pride and selfishness, we can't be in tune with God. But someone who is humble can. Someone who is humble will submit to the mission God gave them. And will walk the path and will be more and more and more in tune with God.
Just want to make a comment that we know, I think we all know, and we understand that we are hopefully making efforts to achieve this humbleness, to achieve and to work on our negative feelings or negative, I can't find the word, to change this within us, to achieve those good virtues. And so when I read this, sometimes I think, wow, I'm so far away yet. I recognize myself. I don't think I am as prideful as I was before, but I still have some days in me. But I'm also working on my humbleness. and trying to, and it's a lot of, and I think we're only going to achieve this when we really are conscious of what we need to work with in us, right?
Yes, not only that,
Yeah.
but also we need to be aware
Mhm.
that there are levels of achievement
Exactly.
and levels of consciousness.
Yeah.
So if we are trying to achieve 100% developed virtue in this life, in this incarnation,
Yeah.
it's not realistic. I'm not saying it's impossible,
Yeah.
but it's not realistic, right?
Yes, exactly.
So you are absolutely right. And what I can share with you is my experience of knowing all that.
Mhm.
I know I'm working, I know I'm trying. So yeah, we know all that. But what I see now that I didn't see before is the little things. Because before, for me, this was like a big umbrella.
Mhm.
I'm trying to improve, I'm trying to be better. And I did 2 or 3 good deeds. You know, the whole thing, I was a good person today.
Yeah.
I helped someone cross the street. I did my good deed of the day. So there's no good deed of the day.
Yeah.
There's no competition. There's no being better than anybody else. Our only competition is ourselves. We can only be better than we were yesterday, right? So what the difference I see now is that this is not a big umbrella anymore. Now I pick my little actions. So one specific situation that I know I'm being prideful, I will reflect on it. Sometimes you can try and fix that situation, but sometimes you can't fix that one. So what you can do is an exercise of humbleness or humility, and think about how you want to do it next time.
Exactly.
Right? So that's the difference for me. It's not a superficial thing anymore. It's not a, oh yes, I'm trying to improve. Yes, I'm trying to improve. It's no. Let's get granular. The teeny tiny things of the daily life.
And this understanding, I think, for me, mine caused 2 different reactions. One, I have no more excuses to say, oh, I'm so prideful yet, so there's no point in working more. No, I
Let's
can
leave it
still,
for next slide.
yeah, I can still make my own decisions and start changing myself. So, because I think that's one thing. And the other one is the understanding that, yes, I have a long way ahead of me, but I am on works here. I'm going towards that path. So it's not, it doesn't, it's not overwhelming anymore. Like, oh, I'm so far away from this, so I'm not even going to try. Right?
Exactly. It's too hard.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's too hard. I can't do it. That's not how it works, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So it's dropping that attitude that has changed for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're going to see a couple passages of the gospel, a couple passages of the Bible, where Jesus highlights humbleness. Some passages that show how important humbleness is. At the time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" Jesus called a little child to him and placed the child among them and said, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." So Jesus is using children here as a symbol of simplicity of heart, as a symbol of a spirit that doesn't have to be superior, a spirit who doesn't, because see, the question here, who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? The whole hierarchy thing, the whole, I'm the doctor of the law, and again, if we go back to 2,000 years ago, 50 years later, all those literatures about the time of Jesus, You know, when we had the doctors of the law in the synagogue, and they would speak and everybody else would listen. And then we go to Christianity, where we read the Bible, we worship Jesus, but we don't try to follow the example. We are still in this state. Who is the greatest? Oh, Jesus is the greatest. How can I compare myself to him? Never mind. It was him, I am me. I'll never be Jesus. Okay? And we have our inner Jesus. We have our inner Christ. And we will all evolve to his level one day. So he uses a child to talk about simplicity of heart. A spirit who doesn't need to be bigger, better, more important than everybody else. Who's not worried about who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes the lowly position of this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. When we understand simplicity of heart, we are welcoming Jesus into our own hearts, into ourselves. We are starting to understand better. And this is Matthew 18, verses 1 to 5, and it's in the Gospel, chapter 7, item 3. Another passage now from Luke. One Sabbath, when Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee, he was being carefully watched. When he noticed how the guests picked the places of honor at the table, he told them this parable. I'm not a rich person, so I can't talk about nowadays, but I know that in the past, when you have a big banquet table, the closer you're sitting to your host, the more important you are, or the closer to the host you are. And as people sit further from the host, they would be not so close friends or not so important. So when Jesus saw that the guests were picking the places of honor, which means the places closer to the host, he told them this parable. When someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for a person more distinguished than you may have been invited. If so, the host who invited both of you will come and say to you, give this person your seat. Then, humiliated, you will have to take the least important place. And by humiliated here means embarrassed. Okay? But when you are invited, take the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he will say to you, friend, move up to a better place. Then you will be honored in the presence of all the other guests. And then comes a maxim, uma máxima, that a lot of people repeat, but it's just the words. And it's usually for someone else. I will say this to you, but that doesn't apply to me, right? Do as I say, not as I do. And then comes this maxim that we all have heard and a lot of people repeat all the time. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all those who humble themselves will be exalted. Okay, so when you read that passage, it makes more sense. He was talking about the position of importance in a feast. Okay, so another passage where Jesus highlights the importance of humbleness or humility. All right? Okay, so Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 7, item 5. And now we are going to see some comments from the instructions of the spirits. Okay, remember how in the gospel we usually have a passage in the gospel, Allan Kardec explains quite a few things, and then we have the instructions from the spirits. Okay, good. Okay. So on dying, man takes with him only that which makes for greatness in heaven, that which is never lost, which are his virtues. We don't take titles, we don't take social position. We are used to hearing everybody saying, oh, after you die, everybody is the same. Everybody goes under 6 feet under the earth, right? That's what we hear and sometimes what we say. But again, in a superficial way. Usually we say that to criticize something who has more than we do, or someone who is being selfish or showing off with money, whatever. So my mom always says that coffins have no drawers, so you can't take your stuff to the tomb with you. No. And that's very true. But that's not the important part. This is the important part. Because we always concentrate on, oh, you can't take your money and your titles with you. And we forget that we all only take our virtues. Mm-hmm. So it's easy to criticize someone and not think about ourselves, mm-hmm. Right? Humility is a virtue. Oh, and this is from the instructions from the spirits, and it's Lacordaire who says this. Humility is a virtue much forgotten amongst you. Of the many examples given, very few have been followed. However, is it possible to be charitable to your neighbor without being humble? Why not? Can't I just give? And here neighbor is in a biblical sense, o próximo, right? Not your actual physical neighbor, but o próximo, other people. So can we be charitable to other people without being humble? Can't I give people, can I give stuff even if I'm prideful?
Oh, you can give stuff. But it's the meaning of charity that I think that makes a difference here, right? To understanding charity as not just helping materially, but especially giving your time and seeing your neighbor as someone who is like you and have the same possibilities of having the same things as you have, or being, or evolve, or develop as a spirit. Seeing your neighbor as someone like you, or even, I think that's the difference. That's the difference between what a lot of people think what charity is. It's just giving, right? Giving material things. And
exactly. And even the material things, they can be two types, two kinds of material things when you give. One is you give people your scraps.
Yeah, that's true.
And the other is you share what you have. Right?
Exactly.
So giving from yours, sharing is the charity. Giving your scraps, mm-hmm. Giving only what's not good for you anymore, but it's good enough for someone lower than you, mm-hmm. That's not charity. That's just pride. Yeah. Right? So we cannot be really charitable. So like Anna said, if we think about the true meaning of charity, material or not material, we can't be charitable if we're not humble. Because when we're not humble, we don't see ourselves like everybody else. Right? Of course not, because this sentiment reduces mankind to the same level by telling them they are brothers and sisters who should help one another mutually, which leads them to a state of goodness. So, of course, we can't be charitable if we're not humble. This sentiment, humbleness or humility, reduces mankind to the same level, puts us as equals, and tells us that we are brothers and sisters who should help one another mutually, with that sense that do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Treat people the way you would want to be treated. Put yourself in the other person's shoes. How would you feel if it were you there? Right? So this is real charity because it's humble, because we understand we're brothers and sisters who should help one another mutually. Without humility, you are merely adorning yourself with virtues you do not possess, as if you use clothes especially for the purpose of hiding some physical deformity. So when we pretend, when we give scraps, what we're doing is we pretend we have humility when we actually don't. So remember he, of course, Jesus, remember he who saved us. Remember his humility, which was so great. He was the greatest spirit incarnated on earth, and his humility showed it, right? All men are equal on the divine scale of justice. Only virtue marks the distinction in the eyes of God. So we are all the same. But only those who understand truly that we are all the same are ready to get into it. All spirits come from the same essence, and all the bodies are formed from the same matter. Your titles and names modify nothing. They remain in the tomb and in no way contribute to the possibility of enjoying the fortunes of the chosen. Their titles of nobleness are based solely on acts of charity and humility. So when he says their title, their here is talking about the chosen, the humble people, okay? So gospel according to Spiritism, item 11, instruction from the spirits, La Portée. Then, how do we become humble then? We know it's important, we know we need to get there, we know we need to work hard, but how do we do it? How do we exercise it? Because knowing I have to do something is one thing. Knowing how to do it is something else. Because we usually stop in the no. I know I have to do it. I know I have to do it. I know I have to do it. But we don't worry about the how, and that means we're not doing it. Mm-hmm. So how? How do we become humble? How do we follow Christ's example? Where do we start?
That's the point.
Right? Because the first part is so very beautiful. Everything, the gospel, the instruction from the spirits, the whole chapter is wonderful. But where do we start? How do we get there? How many centuries have we been working on it? Apparently not very successfully because we're still here. So where do we start? How do we get there so we can finally evolve morally? Our intelligence never stops evolving. Our intelligence evolves all the time. But how do we evolve morally so we get in tune with Jesus and God?
Well, so knowing that you have to develop this virtue, and how would you know that you need? Well, I think all of us here need at a certain level, but you will know if you need because of your acts, they're opposites of humbleness or humility. So I think working on doing the opposites that we usually do when you're not being humble, that's one point. But how it would be like,
yeah, because that's
conscious
the thing.
efforts to work on that,
That's
right?
the thing. We need to start understanding the difference between the real virtue and the masks we wear, right? Because I know that I didn't have a humble attitude. Next time I'm going to do different. So next time I am not going to talk back to my boss. Is that the answer?
Because you're thinking.
Right?
You're talking.
Yeah, and not only that.
Yeah.
It's next time, my boss should be totally wrong. And maybe I should say something about it.
Yeah.
So if my choice of being humble is just I'm gonna abstain, be quiet. Yes, that is not humbleness. That's lack of authenticity. I'm not being authentic. I'm not being true to myself.
And that's another mask.
So the problem is not, for example, in this very poor example, the problem is not talking back to my boss or disagreeing with my boss. The question is how I'm doing it.
Exactly.
So that's what I'm trying to ask there. So how do we get to what is truly humbleness? Because apparently we've been getting it wrong for a few centuries now. So how do we get to the real deal?
Well, you need to know what humbleness means. The true meaning, right? It's not just appear or look like I'm so humble, where, I'm not going to discuss with anyone. I look like a person who accepts everything. That's not it, right?
No, that's not it at all.
And I think that's, well, maybe now,
actually,
we have to understand what.
Yeah, the answer is actually right here. So how do we follow Jesus? By actually following Jesus. Instead of worshiping him, instead of putting a picture on the wall or a statue or on an altar, ask ourselves, what would Jesus do? How many times did Jesus call the doctors of the law hypocrites? He said to their faces, you're hypocrites. When did Jesus ever not say anything about something wrong? Jesus never agreed with something that was wrong. But he never embarrassed anybody in a way that it would say that I am better than you. And oh gosh, he is, right? So what we have to do in order to start slowly really understanding the depth of what that virtue is, what we need to do is to accept his invitation when he says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. When we're tired of suffering, when we're tired of the pain, that's why he says, all you who are weary, weary means really tired, worn out, and burdened. So come to me and I will give you rest. How can Jesus give us rest? How can we have peace of mind or the kingdom of heaven?
When we work our way and following his
When we develop our
teachings.
virtues, right? Only when we are truly humble, only when we are truly, only when we use our free will correctly, only when we are loving, charitable, fair, that's when we will have rest, right? So take my yoke, my direction upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. So, and he says, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. We're going to talk a lot about this next month because of the virtue of the month. So this is kind of an introduction. It's just a taste. But the only way to truly understand and to truly exercise is to accept his invitation. On this book, Convites Terapêuticos de Jesus, we have a few, and we have, I think, one in the library. On this book, there's a practical guide. There are steps, stages for us to understand how to accept his invitation. We are going to talk a bit more about it, like I said, but of course we can't put all the content of the book, and as you can see, there's quite a bit of yellow here. So we can put the content of a whole book in short talks, right? So I would recommend, it's awesome, it's amazing. And not only it has like a guide for accepting this invitation, it also has a technique for recognizing when you are not humble, reflecting on it, deciding to change. What do I do? How do I get there? And how do I know I am getting there? Because sometimes we're like, but I am trying. And we can't measure where we are, not compared to others, but compared to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We can't, like, am I on the right path? Am I doing it right? Or am I completely missing the point? Am I just saying I'm going to shut up and I'm not going to say anything, and I still think that's being humble? So these techniques help us measure ourselves so we know, yeah, no, I'm here. I know I'm here. I'm at this stage. That's what's happening. Okay, let's keep going. So by saying that the kingdom of heaven belongs to the poor in spirit, Jesus teaches that no one will be admitted without simplicity of heart and humility of spirit. In all circumstances, Jesus put humility into the category of virtues that bring men near to God, and pride into the category of vices, vicious, that keep men away from God. The reason for this is clear. So what's the reason? For the humble, for the humble is an act, actually it should be humbleness. Oh, to be okay, to be humble. That makes more sense. For to be humble is an act of submission to God, whereas pride is a revolt against him. Right? So remember, question 115, are some spirits created good and some spirits created evil? So what's the answer? No. No. We're all created unaware, simple and unaware, or simple and ignorant, without the knowledge, right? We have the divine laws in our conscience, but we don't have the experience. So that's the ignorance. That's why some translations say unaware and simple, because we're still not aware. We're going to learn through our experiences, some mistakes, some successes. And then the spirits say that God created us all the same, and he has given a mission to each one of us. And fulfilling, submitting to that mission is what will bring us near to God and pure happiness. Some people submit to the mission, accept the mission, and evolve faster. And some people only complain. So that's the revolt. So some have the pride, which is the father of all other vices, and revolt and refuse to keep going, refuse to develop the virtues. For man, then, there is far greater value for his future happiness by being poor in spirit, as the world would understand it, and rich in moral qualities. And here it says, as the world would understand it, because again, this poor in spirit is not well understood, right? It's really, really not well understood, because poor in spirit just means humble in spirit, which means rich in moral qualities. So it's much better to be rich in moral qualities than to be rich financially, materially. We are just done. Perfect timing.
Ana não fez tanta pergunta assim?
Oh no, we talked about
Just because there's only 2 here today, I do not have many.
Do you have any comments, any questions? Was it too different in English? Was it the same?
It's different for me to find the words to explain, which is, but it's understanding, because it made me think in a different way, like not necessarily thinking, but reading in English and listening, because it's a different language, and it's I think I need to interpret a little bit more. I have to use more of my.
You need to think more.
Yes, exactly.
Like the thing that you're talking, but
exactly.
The processing taking time.
And that actually helped me with a few of the questions I had before.
Yes.
It just kind of makes it feel, so that's awesome. Wow.
That is awesome.
Vocês fizeram? Uau!
Good job.
Desenhos lindos. Muito bem.
Então, a virtude do mês hoje, desse mês é humbleness. Humildade. A gente assistiu o vídeo do Jesus fazendo lá na festa, né? Falando de Francis da Faith, né? E assistimos musiquinhas e vídeos. Aí começando humbleness. Né?
Que legal.
Awesome.
Muito bem.
Good job, guys.
Good job, Mariana. Awesome.
Nice picture.
Yeah. Wow.
Good job.
Good job, guys. Thank you. Acho que nós duas dá, né?
Tá, eu faço mais um vídeo lá então.
A gente vai terminar.
Aí a gente começa.
Ela vai chamar a gente, ok? A gente vem lá no canal dele.
Quase lá.
Vamos fazer que você põe a música.
Coisa.
Eu vou abrir tendo que fechar porque eles vão propaganda.
Entendi.
Inclusive, se quiser parar a transmissão, Na verdade, né, a gente acabou não fazendo a oração final, acho que a gente precisa fazer a oração final dele, depois a gente prepara para o
Sim, por isso que eu tava levantando sobre outra luz.
Tá bom?
So we're gonna do our final prayer. Well, so let's close our eyes. Dear Lord, dear Jesus, and all the mentors of our house, thank you for the opportunity of working today. Thank you for the opportunity of being here, of listening, of reflecting. We thank the mentors of our house for the support, for enlightening us, for working with us. We know we are still flawed. We know we still have so much to learn, to understand, to feel, and to turn into actions. And our hearts filled with gratitude, because we know that being here is a divine opportunity, and it's a blessing. May we finish our work this Sunday with love, with gratitude, with charity. May we be able to share the light, the happiness, the peace that being here brings us. May we be able to share it with our families, with our friends, our co-workers, our neighborhood, our city, the country that has welcomed us, our home country. May we be able to spread the light, to spread the knowledge, and most of all, to spread the love. So we do.